I want to talk about the comparison between a track saw and a table saw. And let me just admit right up front that I started shooting clips for this kind of video weeks ago, and I have been attempting to assemble those clips into something coherent, and it's not working out. Every time I try to figure out what points I want to make, the topic seems more complicated than I thought. And that means interesting. The topic interests me. And I think it interests lots of other people too. It's fairly easy to search online and find people asking about table saw versus track saw. Which one should I get? Do I need both? Can I do everything with one or the other? Here's a snippet that I shot and intended to be the original intro for this video. Right after I placed the order for my dashboard system, while I waited for it to arrive, I began wondering, do I still need my table saw? Of all the video clips that I shot for this topic, I think that might be the only snippet worth saving. And it's mostly worth saving because I kind of liked the way I had set up with the table saw on one side and the dashboard MFT on the other. The actual content of the snippet, I'm not terribly happy with. It is true that I asked myself that question, but I later understood it's not really the question I want to use to approach the topic. I just want to do an objective comparison between my cabinet saw and my track saw. And as soon as I realized that was the focus I wanted, I ran into a problem. That problem is that my track saw is new and shiny and modern, and my MFT is the dashboard system, which is new and shiny and modern. And my table saw is old. Actually, let me correct that. My table saw is a Delta Unisaw, and it's just over 20 years old. So by Delta Unisaw standards, it's actually kind of a youngin'. But the point is, it's not in its best fighting shape. It's not really ready for a fair fight against this shiny new setup I've got here. And so I think my first step is to give my Unisaw a tune-up. And when I started doing that, I ran across what I think is a really good illustration of why I think this comparison is interesting. I'm going to grab the camera and I'll step over and I'll show you. So yeah, this is my cabinet saw, or rather it's the cabinet anyway. The full setup is actually all taken apart in pieces, scattered all over my shop. I still have more work to do, but it's looking already a lot better than it did when I started. One of the things that I needed to clean was these two, I think they're called gears. They're basically these screws that rotate so that you can change the blade height and the bevel angle of the saw. And as moving parts, these tend to need lubrication, and they get covered with dust and gunk, and so they needed to be cleaned. And in order to clean them, I had to take off another piece. The other piece that I had to take off, I'm trying to hold in place now just to illustrate. It's this U-shaped shield, and it basically sits here. It's pretty low tech. It's just this shield that the blade sits in, and it's designed to keep as much sawdust as possible from getting in and gunking up those gears. So I've got this zoomed in a bit, so I'm hoping you can see this shield was attached with two hex bolts through the back inside of the shield. These are simple hex bolts with a 1/2 inch head. So this was a really simple task, but I had to go through multiple tools that all do the same thing in order to get it done. The first thing I tried was a 1/2 inch socket with a ratchet, and of course it didn't have enough play, and I couldn't reach all the way to the back there. The next thing I tried was just a wrench, and that didn't work. Even though I could reach, I didn't have any play. I didn't have a room to rotate the wrench. I said to myself, oh, I should have gone with a deep socket right from the beginning because it would reach. But again, I can't rotate anything that's sticking in from the side. So I ended up having to go with a nut driver. So in this situation, I had 4 tools in my shop, probably more, that all do the same thing. And it's a really simple thing. And yet, only one of them succeeded at the task at hand. This is how things often go in the shop. There may be 2 tools that do basically the same thing. If we have both of them, we want to know which one to use when. If we have only one or the other, we want to know how to get by in a situation that may not be ideal. In either case, we need to have a solid understanding of the strengths and weaknesses of each tool in different situations. So should anyone do a video series covering all the strengths and weaknesses of the varying number of ways of turning a bolt? I think not. The simple fact is, it's not that complicated. There's not that much to say. But a track saw versus a table saw, there's a lot of stuff going on here. We've got rip cuts and cross cuts and short boards and long boards and thick boards and thin boards and narrow boards and wide boards and hardwoods and softwoods and sheet goods and different kinds of blades and bevel cuts and miter cuts and probably several more that I'm forgetting. For every one of those cases I just mentioned, we can ask questions. We can ask questions about accuracy, safety, cost, efficiency, awkwardness, and probably more questions I'm forgetting. And every one of those questions times every one of those cases, you might get different answers for a track saw versus a table saw. There's a lot going on here, and there's stuff to talk about. In the unlikely event that I can remember how to put my table saw back together, I plan to finish the tune-up, give it some upgrades, and then explore the strengths and weaknesses of a table saw versus a track saw. I still think that exploration is going to be interesting. I hope that you might as well. Thanks for watching.